Sievertson!
Whoa, 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 what's going on? I'm right here.
We need to talk.
Okay.
Let's see here. Right here. August 15th, 1814, the day we lost our independence.
Whoa, slow down. What are you talking about?
Okay, right here. In 1776, the American colonists declared independence from Britain. We were an independent nation for almost 40 years, and then Britain took America back.
Of course, we learned all about that in elementary school. But why are you bringing that up now? It's not history class or something.
Okay, just hear me out. How is work on the time machine going?
It's up and running, but, it's too dangerous. You have to worry about paradoxes and all that stuff.
I just had a dream, an amazing dream, where Britain didn't rule this country anymore, where we were free and we were independent. After the rebels lost the War of 1812, they paid dearly for their insubordination. Don't you understand? If we could go back and change the past, that could all change. We could be America. We could be free.
But the time machine is just a prototype. It's only an experiment. It's a scientific thought that has happened to become reality. We can't use it. It's way too dangerous.
This is more than just a dream, Porter. This was like a vision, a gaze into a present where we were no longer plagued by the British. Do you understand? We could be our own people. We could be Americans.
I don't know about this, but I'll have to trust you.
Let's do it. Porter, I'm scared.
Tyson, don't be scared. Everything's gonna work out alright. I've tested it enough.
Okay, let's count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Where are we?
We're in New Orleans.
What are we doing here?
We have to find a way to help the Americans win the War of 1812.
How are we gonna do that?
Come on, Porter, don't you know about the War of 1812?
No.
Oh my gosh, Porter, okay. I'll have to figure out a way to teach you, and then we can help the Americans win the war. Okay, Porter, I had to improvise, but here's this screen, and I'm going to show you a little PowerPoint presentation about the War of 1812, and maybe you'll understand, so we can win this war and be free, okay?
Okay.
Let's go. We're going to start this thing. Okay, let me start off by explaining something, Porter. The War of 1812 is a difficult one to explain. Some wars are fought to obtain land, some to fight for freedom, some to argue over differences in ideology, some are to reclaim land. The War of 1812 was none of these. The War of 1812 was significant in the fact that it was a risky war, nicknamed the Second War for Independence, yet it was fought over pride, honor, and almost nothing else. Britain and America quarreled like angry siblings during the war. Sure, there were supposed reasons for the war, but these were largely only justifications. Following the colonists' victory in the Revolutionary War, many were troubled. They felt like they had just won a rock-paper-scissors game. In a historical sense, the war was relatively quick. The British lost, retreated, and the conflict was over. Done. Simple as that. Wasn't defeating the world's greatest superpower supposed to be harder than that? Were the British just a little tired? Would they go back to Britain, have a nice cup of tea, and then just come back refreshed and reclaim their land? Furthermore, was our victory just a matter of luck? Was it pure happenstance that we came out on top? Essentially what we wanted from this war was a rematch. Best 2 out of 3. This time for bragging rights. This time to be the undisputed victor. Not to be the colony that happened to get lucky and win, but the rebels who fought for liberty and justice and overcame the world's largest empire in a match of will and determination. In November 1812, President James Madison said of the situation, "To have shrunk, under such circumstances, from manly resistance would have been a degradation blasting our best and proudest hopes. It would have struck us from the high ranks where the virtuous struggles of our fathers had placed us, and have betrayed the magnificent legacy which we hold in trust for future generations. It would have acknowledged that on the element which forms 3/4 of the globe we inhabit, where all independent nations have equal and common rights, the American people were not an independent people, but colonists and vassals." Alright, let's start off with the basics. The War of 1812 was fought on American soil and in the Atlantic. The newly independent American colonists faced the mighty British Empire once again. In this war, there were three major frontiers. The first was the Atlantic. Part of the reason we went to war with British sailors was because they were attempting to humiliate us on the high seas using their naval prowess. They would attack American vessels and then impress the crew on board into their army. This impressment, as it was called, angered the Americans. Did the British respect our sovereignty, or did they still consider us their subjects? During the war, the British attempted a blockade of the entire Atlantic seaboard. This, while seeming like a preposterous strategy, wasn't too much of a challenge for the might of Britain's navy. Our navy wasn't nearly powerful enough to face their might head-on, so instead we resorted to some of our previous tactics from the American Revolution. The most important was guerrilla or hit-and-run tactics. Of the naval battles during the War of 1812, Theodore Roosevelt said, "The whole history of the struggle on the ocean is, as regards the Americans, only the record of individual cruises and fights. The material results were not very great, at least in their effect on Great Britain, whose enormous navy did not feel in the slightest degree the loss of a few frigates and sloops, but morally, the result was of inestimable benefit to the United States. The victories kept up the spirits of the people, cast down by the defeats on land, practically decided in favor of the Americans the chief question in dispute, Great Britain's right of search and impressment, and gave the Navy, and thereby the country, a worldwide reputation. I doubt if ever before a nation gained so much honor by a few single-ship duels." The second theater of war was in the south around the Gulf Coast region, the area that states like Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama occupy today. Intelligent leaders of the time realized that victory might not come in the north, as many had believed, but that it may come in the south. This made sense because although the north had people and industry, the south had our largest port city, New Orleans. Attention began to shift to the south during the end of the war. This war is especially strange because after the Treaty of Ghent was signed, and the war was officially over, the south didn't get word right away. They continued to fight and people continued to die, despite the fact the war had been settled. This just further shows how the war wasn't really something that could be diplomatically settled. Think of it like a couple fighting brothers. Their anger toward each other might have some cause, but overall, they fight just because they are brothers, and brothers fight. Despite a parent stepping in to deal with the matter diplomatically, the true inception of the problem, natural resent and anger, isn't resolved. The campaign in the South began in 1813. Creek Indians, who, like other Native Americans, were supported by the British, rose in rebellion in the region, but were soon crushed by Andrew Jackson at Horseshoe Bend in Alabama. The Battle of New Orleans was fought after the Treaty of Ghent was signed, yet it proved an unquestionable conclusion to the war. It began on the morning of January 8, 1815. Several groups of British forces marched toward Andrew Jackson's group of diverse men, comprised of Creole farmers, freed black slaves, pirates, and Tennessee and Kentucky militias. There was little cover to protect the British infantrymen, and they were mowed down by Jackson and his troops, providing a crucial final note to the cacophony that had been the War of 1812. The third and final frontier of the war was located on the U.S.-Canada border near the Great Lakes region and bordering the St. Lawrence River. This became a point of attack for the Americans because it was here that the British forces were weakest, at least at the inception of the war. If we could defeat the small British forces there, American soldiers reasoned, perhaps we could conquer Canada and obtain even more land. To help accomplish this goal, we sent 3 forces out into Canada, one from Detroit, one from Niagara, and one from Lake Champlain. These forces were quickly beaten back once they crossed the Canadian border. Additionally, in this region, control of the Great Lakes was vital. There were many maritime battles between British and American forces on these waters. By 1814, British troops were no longer so weak, and we were no longer protected by Napoleonic France. Macdonough, the 30-year-old commander of an American force, helped snatch the victory from the jaws of defeat when the British nearly destroyed New York. Okay, Porter, now we're going to go through a timeline so that hopefully you can understand the who, what, and when of the War of 1812. Alright, on June 18th, 1812, the war officially started when the United States declared war on Great Britain. From July 16th to the 20th of 1812, the U.S. frigate Constitution outran a British squadron in the Great Chase. In November of 1812, James Madison is re-elected. On the 27th of November 1812, the British government officially blockaded the Chesapeake Bay and the Delaware River. On January 22nd of 1813, The British and their Native American allies repelled Kentucky troops in the bloody Battle of Frenchtown. In February to March of 1813, under the command of David Porter, the Essex rounded Cape Horn and became the first U.S. Navy vessel to enter Pacific waters. On April 13th of 1813, General James Wilkinson and his forces captured Mobile, Alabama. On May 1st of 1813, the Americans celebrate when the British try but fail to capture Fort Meigs. On May 29th of 1813, Sir George Prevost and Sir James Lucas Yeo are repelled at Sackett's Harbor. On June 6th of 1813, there's a turning point in the defense of Upper Canada after the Battle of Stony Creek. On June 19th, 1813, the squadron of Captain Robert Harriet Barclay appears outside of Cleveland, Ohio. On June 22nd, American forces saved the city of Norfolk, Virginia in the Battle of Craney Island. On July 27, 1813, the Battle of Burnt Corn in present-day southern Alabama begins the Creek Wars. On the 30th of August, 1813, the Red Sticks kill hundreds of people in the Fort Mims Massacre. On October 5, 1813, the U.S. have a decisive victory over British and Native American forces in Ontario, Canada. On November 3, 1813, Andrew Jackson's military campaign begins when American dragoons defeat Red Stick warriors in the Battle of Tallulah. On November 16, 1813, British Admiral Sir John Warren officially proclaims an increased blockade to cover the entire U.S. coast. From March 27th to March 28th of 1814, American forces and their Native American allies, under the command of General Andrew Jackson, defeat the Red Sticks, ending the Creek War in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. In the First Battle of Leonard Creek, Commodore Joshua Barney's fleet is cornered. On July 25, 1814, the Americans suffered defeat in the Battle of Lundy's Lane, one of the bloodiest battles of the war. On August 8, 1814, peace negotiations begin in Ghent. Due to their loss in the Creek War, Andrew Jackson forces the Creeks to sign the Treaty of Fort Jackson, which causes them to cede much of their land to the U.S. government. From August 3rd to September 21st, 1814, the Americans successfully defend Fort Erie against the British in one of the war's bloodiest and most protracted engagements. On August 24, 1814, the American forces suffer a defeat that enables the British to capture and burn the public buildings of Washington, D.C. This becomes known as the greatest disgrace ever dealt to American arms. On that same day, British troops invade Washington, D.C. and burn the White House, the Capitol, the U.S. Treasury Building, and many other buildings in Washington, D.C. Much of the historic Washington Navy Yard is destroyed by Americans themselves to prevent the capture of stores, ammunition, and the U.S. frigate Columbia. On September 12th to the 14th of 1814, the British see a tactical victory in the Battle of North Point, although the engagement hinders their advance against Baltimore and buys the Americans precious time. From September 13th to September 14th of 1814, the British bomb Fort McHenry. Inspired by the sight of a tattered American flag flying valiantly in the night, Francis Scott Key writes the national anthem. On November 5th, 1814, American forces stop trying to defend Fort Erie and explode the bastions and burn what remains of the fort. They return to Buffalo. On November 25th, the British fleet heads for New Orleans. On December 23rd, Andrew Jackson's troops that are defending New Orleans begin to see battle. On December 24th, the Treaty of Ghent is signed. On January 8th, Andrew Jackson's troops caused the British to suffer a humiliating defeat in the Battle of New Orleans. This battle, coupled with the Treaty of Ghent, effectively concludes the war. On February 17th, Congress ratifies the Treaty of Ghent, and the war is officially and completely over. Alright, Porter. By now you might be wondering how we ended up losing the War of 1812 in our timeline. Up to this point, my dream and the history we've been taught in our world have been perfectly identical. In our timeline, though, something went awry after this point. In the Battle of New Orleans, 2 British spies snuck into the city. There they caused insurrection and created a pro-British spirit in the South. With the support of Southerners, the British were able to safely enter into our nation from New Orleans, organize their troops, and charge northwards, eventually subjugating all of the former United States citizens. Our plan is simple. We have come to New Orleans to assassinate these 2 spies. Without them, there will be no insurrection, no invasion. We will win the war. You may not have noticed, but I brought along a rifle to take these guys out. All we have to do is take them out for hundreds of millions of people to enjoy freedom. It may not be ideal, but the ends justify the means. Porter, how's your day going? Blah, blah, blah. Talking about war stuff with Bruce, blah, blah, blah.
Headshot.
We did it, Porter! We won the war!
Oh yeah!
America!